All right, so we talked a little bit about how you basically do it, but now really the best way to learn this is actually to do some problems from the book. And so I'm going to do a few problems from the book. So the problems in the book start on page 127, exercise 5.4, considered symbolic translation. The first 20 of these are all translating fairly simple things. There are two ideas at the most in these statements, and then some of them only have one, and you just have to figure out if it needs negation, a plus, a minus, or if it needs negation, if it's going to need a plus sign, a wedge, an if, then, a horseshoe or a triple bar. You basically just need to know how you're going to translate these two statements. These are all fairly simple. If you can go through these 20 and do them after you've kind of learned those, then, you're going to do that's going to be your first key to doing these, okay? So the first one says, if it's raining, then the forecast is correct. And it has the letters R and C. And so basically, if it is raining, R is supposed to be standing for it is raining. And then the other one is saying, then the forecast is correct. So the forecast is correct is letter C. And we have this other language, which is the word if-then. So we simply translate the if-then as a horseshoe. So we say, if it is raining, horseshoe, then the forecast is correct. The next one, Congress enacts laws and the judicial branch enforces them. So we have two simple ideas. Congress enacts laws. The other simple statement is the judicial branch enforces them. So we have the letter C, the letter J, and the word that's between them is the word and. So we just simply put a plus sign. Simple enough, right? Melba left the car and Roy cleaned the fish. Oh, I'm sorry, skip number 3. If Japanese industrialists borrow heavily from American banks, then the interest rates will climb even higher. Now this one, some of you might go, oh my goodness, there's a lot of ideas in there. Well, really it's just two simple statements. The first statement is Japanese industrialists borrow heavily from American banks. That's one idea. Japanese industrialists borrow heavily from American banks. Letter J. The interest rates will climb higher. I. So you have an if-then between them. So it's just simply if J, then I. Now the benefit of this is that we can now assess the method of validity without getting all tied down all that language, all those extra words. Every time you read it, you're going, well, is that true about those Japanese and the American industrialists and the banks? And you're going, I don't know, that doesn't mesh with my macroeconomic policies. No, you don't have to get all confused by that. You just say, if J, then I. Now I can assess the logic of this without getting tied down or bogged down a bunch of words that maybe I don't even understand, or words that perhaps I see one way, but they're not actually, the argument is invalid, but everything about it is true. And so it may be one of those where you have true statements, the factual claim is passed, but the inferential claim is not. And so by stripping away the language, we can assess that inferential claim in a very direct way. So I'm going to do about 2 or 3 more of these. The next one is, Melba left the car and Roy cleaned the fish. Melba left the car and Roy cleaned the fish. M plus R. Number 5, artists are not crazy. In this case, we have one idea. Artists are crazy, but there's that big not in there. So we simply put bar A. Now the bar is a unique letter in that the bar negates the idea, the letter, or the idea that follows it. Bars can go before individual letters. Bars can go below statements in parentheses, which we'll talk about here in a second. But bars don't show a relationship. You can't have M bar R. That doesn't mean anything. This means M is true, bar R is true. But what's the relationship? Is this a wedge? Is this a plus? Is this a horseshoe? Is this a triple bar? What's the relationship between M and not R? And so bar does not show a relationship between two ideas. It simply negates the idea that follows it. The others show a relationship, and you always will need this between them. Now, you can have a bar in front of a letter, so you could have something like Martha is there and Bill is not, and that bar negates Bill. Bill is not, Martha is there, and this plus shows the relationship between this part and this part here. Okay? So the last four, the wedge, plus, horseshoe, and triple bar, show a relationship between statements. The negation, all it does is negate what follows it. Now let's just glance through this. There were 3 people involved in the accident, and no one was injured. Okay? There were 3 people involved in the accident, and no one was injured. What were the letters they used? I'm sorry, I got to look there. I'm sorry, that was number 9. There were 3 people involved, so letter T, and no one was injured. There's a plus, but we have that no, so we want to probably use the negation. 3 people were involved, and no one was injured. Okay? Go through this list. You can look them up. Let me do number 10. Smoking is harmful if and only if the Surgeon General is correct in the warning. So we have smoking is harmful, what the Surgeon General says, which is the letter C. And then if and only if is a triple bar. Okay? I hope that makes sense. But don't get confused and think that you have to have multiple letters or multiple ideas. I mean, you can look at number 12. In parentheses, there's one letter, the letter B. That's because there's only one idea there. It's just the letter B. There are 640 species of birds in North America. It's just one idea. It's just one letter. Okay, so now then, after you do that, we begin to have this idea that, not everything comes down to a simple statement like, Bill is there, or Tony is there, right? Bill or Tony is there. It doesn't always come down to something that simple. Sometimes it'll be something like, if Bill or Tony is there, then Joe will be there. Okay? Sometimes it might come down to something like, if Bill or Tony is there, then Joe will be there, and there will not be any cake, right? And that could even get more complex. You can have ideas like, I don't know, if and only if why, right? I don't even know what that means at this point. But the idea there is sometimes a statement can get very complex. You can have a lot of simple ideas all strung together into one very large, complex statement. And so what you need is a way to break these apart. You need parentheses, you need brackets, you need other forms of devices. I will tell you, I don't, I mean, it's fun to get into really complex statements and to translate them. Everybody has to have a hobby, right? And I find that to be great fun, personally. But, I realize most of you, most of what we will do will not be getting that complex. But we at least need to have the idea, like, it's not the case that Bill and Sue will be here, then Joe will be here. If it's not the case that Bill and Sue will be here, then Joe will be here. I don't know, something like that. We need to have a way to symbolize it. And so what happens is there are a few basic rules. If you have more than one of these relational operations, plus, wedge, horseshoe, or triple bar, then you're going to need parentheses. Just as in math, if I write 2 plus 2 minus 2, that is going to mean 2 different things if I say 2, is that right? No. Divided by 2, there we go. Now that'll come up with something else. If I have 2 plus 2 divided by 2, and I don't have any parentheses, right? That means 2 completely different things. If the parentheses go here, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so 2 plus 1 equals 3. But if the parentheses go here, it's 4 divided by 2, which equals 2. And so the parentheses become very important, right? And the same thing is true in logic. You need to have parentheses anytime you have more than one relational operator. Now, if you have a bar A plus bar B, this means it's not the case that A is true and it's not the case that B is true. That makes sense without anything, because this is negating that, and this is negating that, and this is showing the relationship between this negated statement and that negated statement. Now, if you want to put parentheses around that, that's fine, but you don't have to put parentheses by any means. Most people would not. Now, what happens is, but if you add in another idea like bar B plus C wedge A, then we have this question of, is the case that Bob will not be here and Cindy will, or Al will be here, or is it the case that Bob won't be here and Cindy or Al will be here? Those mean different things. And so you need parentheses here to show the relationship. So anytime you have two or more symbols, you will need parentheses. And what basically all the parentheses do is they group the ideas together. And you get certain little language cues, perhaps where a not is, or perhaps where a comma is, or perhaps a semicolon or other things will symbolize that you have a break. And that all helps us to understand where these go. Now, the only other thing I want to make a note of before we do a few examples is that when you have something like neither Bill nor Cindy will be there. Nor is like saying or, and we have neither Bill nor Cindy will be there. We actually translate that as bar is not either B or C, right? So the not is negating the entire thing. So the not goes out in front. And the reason why is if I say neither Bill nor Cindy will be there, I'm not saying Bill won't be there or Cindy won't be there, right? Because if I say Bill won't be there or Cindy won't be there, I'm saying one of them won't be there, but the other one might. But if I say neither Bill nor Cindy will be there, then I'm saying Bill or Cindy being there is not the case. And I am saying neither of them will be there. And so this does not mean the same thing as this. Just because you have a bar in front of the parentheses doesn't mean you can just simply go, you know what, I'm just going to bring it into the parentheses and do it like that when I translate it. No, you have to translate that idea separately. If the not comes before the word both, or the not comes before, or you have the word neither, or you have the word not either, or if you have the case like it's not the case that, then you have something like B plus C, then in those cases you are signifying not is before both A and B, not is before the either, A wedge C, not either, not is before the A wedge C. And so in those cases, the bar is going to go outside the parentheses. But if the bar is something like Joe and Bob won't be there, then you're not saying it's not the case that Joe and Bob will be there. It's saying Joe won't be there and Bob won't be there. Because if it's not the case that Joe and Bob will be there, allows for the possibility that Joe could be there. It's just the case that they won't both be there. And if I say Joe and Bob won't be there, then I'm saying Joe isn't there and Bob isn't there. Which means you need to have a little bit of awareness of what you are intending to mean when you translate these. Let's do a few examples. I'll talk about the exam, but I'm going to stop this now so that I don't go up against my 15-minute window.